far behind. Where Amaka was bold and cheerful, Ezine was quiet and observant, always the shadow behind her friend's light. They shared everything: clothes, food, even their deepest secrets. When Amaka dreamed of a life in the big city, Ezine dreamed along with her. When Ezine cried over her struggles, Amaka held her hand and said, "Don't worry, Ezi baby, our time will come." But as the years rolled by, the winds of life began to blow differently for the two friends. Life began to favor Amaka in ways Ezine could only dream of. Amaka secured a good job with an oil company, rented a nice apartment in Lagos, and found the kind of man every woman prayed for: a tall, dark, and responsible man named Chidi. Ezine's life, however, stayed the same. She remained in Enugu, teaching in a poorly paid private school, watching her dreams slip through her fingers. One evening, Ezine's phone rang. It was Amaka. Her voice was full of excitement. "Ezi baby, guess what?" Amaka laughed. "What is it, Amaka?" Ezine asked, already knowing it would be something good. "Shidi proposed. I'm getting married." Amaka's laughter rang through the phone like a song. "You'll be my maid of honor, right?" Ezine's heart sank. She forced a smile and laughed into the phone. "Ah, Amaka, this is good news. Of course I'll be your maid of honor." But when the call ended, Ezine sat quietly, staring at the walls of her small room. Her heart felt heavy, like a stone sinking to the bottom of a river. "Why always her?" she whispered. Her chest burned with envy, and tears rolled down her cheeks. That night, as the stars twinkled in the sky, Ezine lay awake, thinking. She wasn't just Ezine anymore. She was the moon, watching the sun rise higher and higher, leaving her behind in the shadows. A few months later, Amaka called with another request. "Ezi, my landlord has increased my rent overnight," Amaka said, her tone full of frustration. "I can't afford to stay here anymore. Chidi says I should move in with him until we get married, but you know how people talk. I need you to come and stay with me. Please, it's just for a few months." Ezine froze. Living with Amaka and Chidi? Watching them love and laugh together every day? Her chest tightened at the thought. But how could she say no? Refusing would only make her look jealous, something she didn't want Amaka to suspect. "Okay," Ezine said softly after a long pause. "I'll come." 2 days later, with a heavy heart, Ezine packed her small bag. She folded her clothes neatly, but her mind was a storm. "Can I really do this?" she whispered to herself. "God, give me strength." The journey to Lagos was long and tiring. The loud hum of the bus mixed with the chatter of other passengers, but Ezine barely noticed. Her thoughts were elsewhere, swirling like leaves in the wind. When she arrived at Amaka's apartment, Amaka greeted her with a warm hug, her smile as bright as ever. "Ezi baby, welcome to Lagos." Chidi stood behind Amaka, his tall frame leaning against the doorway. He smiled politely. "Ezine, it's good to see you again." "Thank you," Ezine replied, forcing a smile. The apartment was beautiful, just as Ezine had imagined. The furniture was new, the walls were painted in soft, calming colors, and everything smelled fresh. But as she looked around, she noticed small signs of Amaka and Chidi's love. Photos of them together on the walls, a pair of his shoes beside hers, and a mug that said, "Forever yours." That first night, Ezine sat alone in her new room, listening to the sound of laughter coming from the living room. Amaka and Chidi were watching a movie, their voices mingling like a sweet melody. Ezine stared at the ceiling, her heart heavy. "This will be harder than I thought," she whispered, blinking back tears. She had come to help her friend, but deep down, she knew she was stepping into a storm she wasn't ready for. Living with Amaka and Chidi was like sitting by a warm fire, but feeling the heat burn your skin. Every day, Ezine watched their love unfold before her eyes, and each moment felt like a thorn piercing her heart. Chidi treated Amaka like a queen. Every morning, he brought her breakfast in bed, steaming tea, golden toast, and eggs cooked just the way she liked. "Good morning, my love," he'd say, planting a kiss on her forehead. "Chidi, you'll spoil me," Amaka would reply, laughing as she held his hand. At night, they would sit together on the couch, Chidi massaging Amaka's feet while she told him about her day. "You're my everything," he'd whisper, and Amaka's laughter would fill the room like a sweet song. Ezine sat in the corner, pretending to read a book, but her eyes often wandered to them. Her chest felt tight, her envy growing like weeds in a neglected garden. But she noticed something else too, small cracks in their perfect picture. Amaka's temper flared occasionally, snapping at Chidi when she was tired. "Chidi, why didn't you buy the fabric I asked for?" she'd say, her voice sharp. Chidi, in turn, had his moments. "Amaka, you don't need to go out so often. Why not stay home and rest?" he'd suggest, his tone firm but calm. Ezine began to see opportunities in those cracks. She started planting seeds, small and subtle. "Amaka," she said one evening, after a minor argument between the couple, "I think you should be more patient with Chidi. Men don't like to feel unappreciated." Amaka waved it off with a laugh. "Izzy, it's nothing. Every couple has small fights. Don't worry about us." But Ezine didn't stop there. Whenever Amaka shared frustrations, Ezine would nod and say, "You're right, but maybe Chidi just doesn't understand you fully. Some men are like that." Slowly, her words became like tiny drops of water wearing away at a stone. Amaka didn't take it seriously, but Ezine felt a strange satisfaction. The sun still shone brightly in Amaka's world, but Ezine, the quiet moon, was learning how to cast shadows. Her bitterness, hidden behind kind smiles and soft words, was growing stronger. She wasn't just watching anymore, she was waiting. Ezine's envy had grown into something darker, something she could no longer ignore. Watching Amaka and Chidi's love felt like standing outside in the rain, cold and forgotten. She decided it was time to act. One evening, Ezine stepped into the living room wearing a tight-fitting dress that hugged her figure like a second skin. The fabric shimmered under the soft light, drawing attention to her every curve. Chidi was sitting on the couch, watching football, his eyes glued to the screen. "Chidi, how was work today?" Ezine asked, her voice soft and sweet. She sat down beside him, much closer than she needed to. Chidi shifted in his seat, glancing at her briefly before looking back at the TV. "Work was fine, Ezine. Is Amaka back?" "She's still at the market," Ezine said with a smile. She leaned forward slightly, making sure her neckline dipped just enough to catch his eye. "You're such a good man, Chidi. Amaka is really lucky to have you." Chidi cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Thank you, Ezine," he said quickly before standing up. "I'll go check on dinner." But Ezine wasn't discouraged. The next day, she found another opportunity. Chidi was in the bathroom and she accidentally opened the door. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, covering her eyes dramatically. But she didn't leave immediately. Chidi grabbed a towel, his face a mix of embarrassment and irritation. "Ezine, please knock next time," he said, his voice firm. "I didn't mean to," she replied, her tone apologetic but her smile lingering. "I'll be more careful." At first, Chidi tried to avoid her. He spent more time at work and less time at home, but Ezine was persistent. She brushed past him in the hallway, her hand grazing his arm. She found excuses to start conversations, her words laced with subtle compliments. Chidi, you're so thoughtful, she said one evening when he brought Amaka her favorite snack. Not all men are like you. Amaka is truly blessed. Her intentions were becoming clearer, and Chidi could feel the weight of her advances. He didn't know how to confront her without causing a scene, but her presence was becoming harder to ignore. Ezina's jealousy was no longer a quiet shadow. It was a storm brewing in the corners of their home, waiting for the right moment to strike. Chidi couldn't keep the weight of Ezina's behavior to himself any longer. It felt like carrying a pot of boiling water, threatening to spill over at any moment. One evening, as Amaka sat on their bed scrolling through her phone, he took a deep breath and spoke. Amaka, there's something I need to tell you, he said, his voice heavy. Amaka looked up, her eyes curious. What is it, Chidi? It's about Ezina, he began cautiously. She's been acting differently around me. I don't know how to say this, but it makes me uncomfortable. Amaka frowned, confusion clouding her face. What do you mean differently? She's always wearing revealing clothes, sitting too close to me, and sometimes even brushing against me unnecessarily. I think she's trying to get my attention in ways that aren't right. Amaka's expression darkened, but not in the way Chidi expected. Her frown turned to anger, and she sat up straighter. Chidi, do you hear yourself? Ezine is my best friend, my sister. How can you accuse her of something so terrible? Amaka, I'm just telling you what I've noticed, Chidi said, his voice rising slightly. I don't think she means well. But Amaka shook her head, dismissing his words. Chidi, you're imagining things. Maybe you're the one looking at her the wrong way. I can't believe you would say this about her. Chidi's heart sank. He had hoped Amaka would understand, but instead, she had turned the blame on him. Later that night, Amaka confronted Ezine. Her voice was firm, but tinged with disbelief. Ezi, Chidi said you've been behaving inappropriately around him. What's going on? Ezine gasped, her eyes widening as tears welled up. Amaka, how can Chidi say such a thing? I would never do that to you. You're my sister, my everything. Amaka softened, seeing Ezine's tears. I thought so too. I told him he must be misunderstanding. I just needed to hear it from you. Of course, it's not true, Ezine cried, wiping her eyes. Chidi must have misread my actions. Maybe I've been too friendly, but it's only because I care about you both. Amaka, I swear on everything, I would never hurt you like that. Amaka hugged her tightly, whispering, I'm sorry for even asking, Ezi. I'll talk to Chidi. He needs to stop this nonsense. But while Amaka comforted her, Ezine's mind was racing. Chidi had dared to expose her. He wanted to ruin her plan. Her tears dried quickly and her heart hardened. As the house grew quiet that night, Ezine lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was a whirlwind of anger and determination. So, Chidi thinks he can warn Amaka about me? She whispered to herself. No problem. I'll make sure he never gets the chance again. The fire of jealousy that had been simmering in Ezine's heart now blazed, and she vowed to remove Amaka from the picture, no matter the cost. Ezine's thoughts were no longer clouded by doubt. Her jealousy had grown into a beast, and she was ready to do whatever it took to claim Chidi for herself. One morning, as she walked through the bustling market, her eyes fell on a woman selling herbs in a dim corner. The woman's face was sharp, her eyes dark with secrets. Madam, Do you know someone who can handle a problem for me? Ezine asked cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. What kind of problem? Ezine hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. Someone who can make someone disappear. The woman nodded slowly, her smile widening. Follow me. She led Ezine through a narrow path behind the market where a group of rough-looking men sat playing cards. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and cheap liquor. This is Ugo, the woman said, gesturing toward the leader, a man with scars on his face and cold, calculating eyes. Ezine's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to speak. I need your help. There's someone standing in the way of my happiness. I want her gone. Ugo leaned back, studying her with amusement. Gone, you say? You mean dead? Ezine swallowed hard, then nodded. Yes. Ugo laughed, a deep, rough sound. Women and their problem, always over a man. Why don't you just find another one? Ezine's face hardened. You don't understand. He's mine. She's the only thing in my way. Ugo's laughter faded, and he leaned forward. Fine, but it will cost you. I'll pay whatever it takes, Ezine said quickly, pulling out a bundle of cash. It was all the money she had saved over the years, but she didn't care. Ugo took the money, counting it slowly before tucking it into his pocket. We'll handle it, he said, his voice cold. Give us her details. Ezine described Amaka, her routine, the places she frequented, and the time she usually returned home. Every word felt like a knife twisting in her chest, but she pushed the guilt aside. As she walked back home, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. This is for the best, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. Once she's gone, everything will fall into place. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, You're betraying her. You're destroying the only real bond you've ever had. Ezine silenced the thought, her resolve hardening like iron. She had already set the wheels in motion, and there was no turning back. The price of betrayal had been paid, and she was ready to collect. Then one evening, Amaka walked briskly, her bag slung over her shoulder. She had stayed late at work, and the road ahead seemed darker than usual. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. At first, she didn't think much of it, but the steps grew louder, faster. A chill ran down her spine. Who's there? She called out, her voice steady but tinged with fear. Before she could turn, strong hands grabbed her, pulling her into a dimly lit alley. She struggled, her bag falling to the ground. Please, let me go, Amaka cried, her voice trembling. I don't have much money, but you can take everything I have. The men surrounded her, their faces shadowed, but their intentions clear. Ugo, the leader, stepped forward, his scarred face illuminated by the dim light. It's not about money, he said coldly. Then why? Why are you doing this to me? Amaka asked, tears streaming down her face. Ugo's lips curled into a cruel smile. Your best friend says hello. Amaka froze, her breath catching in her throat. Ezine, she whispered, disbelief washing over her. No, you're lying. Ezine would never do this. The men chuckled, their laughter echoing in the narrow alley. She paid us well, Ugo said. Said you were standing in her way. Amaka's heart shattered into pieces. Her legs felt weak, her body trembling as she fell to her knees. Ezine is my sister. I've done everything for her. Why would she do this to me? She clasped her hands together, her voice breaking as she pleaded. Please, don't do this. I'll give you more money than she did. Just let me go. I have a wedding to plan. I have a life to live. Ugo's expression didn't change. He nodded to one of his men, who pulled out a gun. Sorry, madam. Business is business, Ugo said, his voice flat. No, please, Amaka screamed, her voice echoing in the night. Before she could utter any more words, the sound of a gunshot ripped through the air, silencing her cries. Birds scattered into the sky, and the bustling streets of Lagos seemed to pause for a brief moment. The men disappeared into the darkness, dragging Amaka behind. Her bag lay open on the ground, its contents spilling out, a photo of her and Ezine smiling together among them. The streets carried no trace of her by morning. Only the whispers of betrayal lingered, carried by the wind. The next morning, Ezine sat in the living room, waiting anxiously for news. She expected to hear about Amaka's death, to cry fake tears, and console Chidi. She had rehearsed her lines over and over in her head. Amaka didn't come home last night, Chidi said, pacing the living room. His voice trembled, his face pale with fear. Ezine sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together. She wore a mask of concern, but inside her heart raced, not with worry, but with the thrill of her plan unfolding. Maybe she's stuck somewhere, Ezine said softly. Traffic in Lagos can be terrible. Chidi shook his head, running his hands through his hair. No, she would have called me. This isn't like her. By afternoon, the news of Amaka's disappearance had spread. Her co-workers, friends, and family all called, their voices filled with concern. Chidi spent the day making frantic phone calls to the police, hospitals, and anyone who might have seen her. Ezine played her role perfectly. She stayed by Chidi's side, offering comfort and support. We'll find her, she said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. She's strong. She'll come back. But as days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. Chidi's eyes grew dull, and the lines on his face deepened. The house, once filled with Amaka's laughter, now echoed with silence. Ezine used this silence to her advantage. She cooked Chidi's meals, cleaned the house, and sat with him in the evenings, listening to his pain. You're not alone, Chidi, she would say, her voice gentle. Chidi, broken by grief, began to lean on her. One night, as they sat together in the dimly lit living room, Ezine placed her hand over his. Chidi, she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. I'm here for you. I'll always be here for you. Chidi looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. Thank you, Ezine. I don't know what I'd do without you. In that moment, Ezine leaned in and kissed him. Her lips brushed against his, soft and deliberate. Chidi didn't pull away. That night, Ezine slept in Chidi's bed, her head resting on the same pillow where Amaka's had once lain. As she drifted off to sleep, a small smile played on her lips. Amaka was gone, and Ezine had taken her place. The plan had worked. The sun now shone on Ezine, while the shadow of her betrayal loomed silently over them. Months passed, and Ezine played her role as the comforting partner flawlessly. Chidi, still carrying the weight of Amaka's disappearance, began to rely on her more and more. She was always there, cooking his meals, easing his burdens, and whispering soft reassurances that things would somehow get better. Then, one evening, Ezine sat Chidi down after dinner. Her face was a mixture of nervousness and determination. Chidi, there's something I need to tell you, she began, her voice low. What is it? Chidi asked, his brow furrowed. I'm pregnant, Ezine said, her eyes fixed on him. Chidi froze. the weight of her words pressing down on him like a heavy stone. "Pregnant?" he repeated, almost as if he didn't believe it. "Yes," Ezine said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't plan for this to happen, but maybe it's a sign that we're meant to move on and build a family together." Chidi stared at her, his emotions swirling. The grief for Amaka still lingered, but now there was something else. A new responsibility, a life growing inside Ezine. After a long silence, he nodded slowly. "We'll figure this out," he said, though his voice carried more resignation than joy. Ezine exhaled in relief, her mind already working on how to solidify her place further. She started preparing for the baby with excitement, painting a picture of a happy family in Chidi's mind. Months later, Ezine gave birth to a baby boy. Chidi held his son for the first time, a faint smile crossing his face. For a brief moment, Ezine believed everything was falling into place. She had Chidi, a child, and a life she had always envied. But the cracks in her perfect picture began to show. The baby was born with a heart defect, and the hospital bills quickly piled up. Chidi's exhaustion deepened, and his moments of joy became fleeting. "Your son has a sickle cell and also a heart defect," the doctor had said, his voice grave. "He'll need constant care and possibly surgery." The medical bills were like a mountain they couldn't climb. Every visit to the hospital drained their savings, and Ezine felt the weight of it pressing on her chest. Chidi, once attentive and caring, had changed. He began leaving the house early and coming home late, burying himself in work. When he was home, he barely spoke, his eyes distant and tired. "Chidi, we need to talk," Ezine said one evening as he sat at the dining table, staring at his untouched plate of food. "What is it?" he replied, his voice flat. "I know things are hard right now, but we're in this together. We're a family," Ezine said, reaching for his hand. Chidi pulled his hand away, his expression cold. "I'm tired, Ezine. Every day is something else. Hospital bills, the baby's health, this house. This isn't the life I wanted." Ezine's heart sank. "Chidi, I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can." "Sometimes trying isn't enough," Chidi said, standing up. "I need space. Don't push me." Ezine watched him walk away, his footsteps heavy with frustration. She felt a lump in her throat, but no tears came. Instead, a deep emptiness settled in her chest. She tried everything to win him back, cooking his favorite meals, dressing in clothes she knew he liked, and reminding him of the life they could have together. But Chidi remained distant, his grief for Amaka lingering like a ghost in the corners of their home. Their once perfect image of love was crumbling, piece by piece. The cracks in their foundation had grown into deep chasms, and no matter how hard Ezine tried, she couldn't close them. As she lay awake at night, listening to her son's faint breathing, Ezine wondered if this was the life she had sacrificed everything for. The weight of her choices pressed on her like a heavy stone, and for the first time, she began to doubt if she could hold it all together. The cries of children became a constant in the house. After their first son, Ezine gave birth to more children, 4 in total. Each child came with their own struggles. Their second daughter was born an imbecile, with saliva always dripping down his mouth uncontrollably. The third son had developmental delays and paralysis, requiring expensive therapy sessions. By the time their fourth child was born, Ezine felt like she was drowning in responsibilities. Chidi had changed even more. He was no longer the attentive man who once made breakfast for Amaka or whispered sweet words of love. Instead, he was distant, spending most of his time at work or away on business trips. Chidi, the school fees are overdue, Ezine said one evening, her voice weary. She was balancing a crying baby on her hip while the older children argued in the background. Chidi didn't even look up from his phone. I'll handle it, he said, his tone dismissive. When? The school is already threatening to send them home, Ezine pressed. I said I'll handle it, Chidi snapped, standing up and walking out of the room. Ezine felt a pang of frustration and sadness. She was trying to hold the family together, but it felt like Chidi didn't care anymore. Then one day, everything came crashing down. Ezine overheard a phone conversation Chidi was having in the living room. Yes, I'll send the money tomorrow, he said. Tell the kids I'll visit next weekend. Ezine froze, her heart pounding. Kids? What kids? When Chidi ended the call, Ezine confronted him. Who were you talking to? She demanded. Chidi sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't have the energy for this, Ezine. Don't lie to me, Chidi. Who are these kids you're sending money to? Chidi stared at her, his face unreadable. They're mine, he said flatly. Ezine's breath caught. Yours? You mean you have other children outside this marriage? Yes, Chidi replied, his tone unapologetic. I've been taking care of them, just like I take care of this family. Ezine's knees felt weak. She grabbed the edge of the table for support. How could you do this to me, Chidi? After everything I've sacrificed for us? Chidi laughed bitterly. Sacrificed? You think I don't know the chaos you brought into my life? You think I don't know what happened to Amaka? Don't act like a victim, Ezine. You got what you wanted, didn't you? Ezine's face burned with shame and anger. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Chidi walked past her, grabbing his car keys. I'll be home late, he said, leaving without another glance. Ezine stood alone in the living room, the weight of her choices pressing down on her like a storm cloud. The life she had built was falling apart, and she couldn't stop it. More children had come, but instead of bringing joy, they had only deepened the cracks in their already broken foundation. As the years passed, another problem began. Ezine began to have nightmares about Amaka. In the dreams, Amaka would appear, standing at the foot of her bed, her face pale and sorrowful. Why did you do it, Ezine? Amaka would ask. Ezine would wake up sweating, her heart racing. She'd sit up, clutching her chest, trying to calm the storm inside her. But the dreams kept coming, night after night, like uninvited guests that refused to leave. One day, as Ezine walked through the crowded market, her arms full of groceries, she thought she saw a familiar figure in the distance. The woman was wearing a simple dress and had a gait that was all too familiar. Her heart stopped. Amaka, she whispered, her voice trembling. She dropped her basket and pushed through the crowd, her eyes fixed on the figure. Amaka, she called, louder this time. The woman turned briefly, her face obscured by the sunlight. For a moment, Ezine thought she saw Amaka's features, the curve of her cheek, the softness of her lips. But before Ezine could reach her, the woman disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the sea of people. Ezine stood frozen, her heart pounding like a drum. It can't be, she whispered to herself. She's gone. I know she's gone. But the guilt that had been simmering beneath the surface now bubbled over, consuming her like a wildfire. Every sound, every shadow seemed to remind her of Amaka. The laughter of women in the market felt like a mockery of her betrayal. The empty corners of her home felt like they were filled with Amaka's presence, watching, judging. Ezine tried to push the guilt away, but it clung to her like a second skin. Her children's cries sounded like accusations. Chidi's cold stares felt like punishment. Even the walls of the house seemed to whisper, "Why?" Her mind became a prison, and Amaka's ghost was the warden, haunting her every moment. The weight of her actions was no longer just a burden. It was a noose tightening around her neck, making each breath harder to take. Ezine had wanted everything Amaka had, but now she realized she had gained nothing but regret, sorrow, and the unrelenting ghost of the sister she had betrayed. 25 years after Amaka's disappearance, everything changed. Chidi was now a retired businessman, and Ezine was living a quiet life, still caring for their children. One sunny afternoon, a car pulled up in front of their house. Ezine was in the kitchen when a knock echoed through the house. It wasn't the casual knock of a neighbor or the hurried rap of a delivery man. It was slow, deliberate, almost ominous. "Who could that be?" Chidi muttered, folding his newspaper and heading for the door. When he opened it, the world seemed to stop. Standing there, dressed simply but with an air of quiet strength, was Amaka. "Amaka?" Chidi's voice cracked, his hands gripping the door frame for support. His face turned pale, his eyes wide with shock. Ezine, hearing the name, froze. Her hands trembled as the bowl she was holding slipped and shattered on the floor. Amaka stepped inside, her gaze steady and piercing. "Hello, Chidi." "Hello, Ezine," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of years gone by. Ezine stumbled into the living room, her heart pounding like a drum. "Amaka," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's not possible. You're dead?" Amaka finished for her, her lips curving into a faint, bitter smile. "That's what you thought, isn't it, Ezine?" Chidi, still rooted to the spot, managed to find his voice. "Where have you been? What happened to you?" Amaka sighed and sat down, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she carried the weight of the years on her shoulders. "I think it's time you both knew the truth," she said, her voice steady. She began to recount the night of the attack. The thugs had cornered her, their intentions clear. But when she pleaded for her life, offering them money and explaining her friendship with Ezine, something unexpected happened. "They hesitated," Amaka said, her eyes fixed on Ezine. "They told me everything, how you, my so-called sister, had paid them to kill me because I was standing in your way." Ezine's knees buckled, and she sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "Amaka, Don't interrupt me," Amaka said sharply, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "The leader, Ugo, spared my life. He said he didn't want to kill someone who had only ever helped others. But they warned me. If I ever came back, they'd finish the job." Amaka's gaze softened for a moment, but only briefly. "So I left. I disappeared. I started over in a small town far away. But not a day passed that I didn't think about you, Ezine, about why you did it. And now, after 25 years, I decided I had to face my past, no matter the cost." Chidi's voice trembled with anger as he turned to Ezine. You planned to kill her. Ezine, how could you? After everything Amaka did for you, after all the years we spent together. Tears streamed down Ezine's face as she stammered. "Chidi, I can't explain. I was jealous. I thought if she was gone, we could have a life together." "Jealous?" Chidi's voice rose, filled with rage. "You destroyed everything. You ruined my life, her life, our family. For what? For your selfishness. Amaka stood, her face calm but resolute. I didn't come here to destroy what's left of your family, Chidi. I just needed to tell the truth, to free myself from the pain I've carried all these years. She turned to Ezine, her eyes cold. You took everything from me, Ezine. My home, my love, my future. But you couldn't take my life. And now I leave you with the one thing you can never escape, your guilt. Without another word, Amaka walked out of the house, leaving Chidi and Ezine in stunned silence. Ezine's sobs filled the room as Chidi stood motionless, his face a mask of devastation. The truth had shattered what little remained of their fragile lives, leaving behind only the wreckage of betrayal. The house was heavy with silence after Amaka's departure. Chidi paced back and forth, his fists clenched, his breathing sharp and uneven. Ezine sat hunched in a corner, her face buried in her hands. The air between them crackled with tension, the weight of the truth pressing down like a storm about to break. Tell me it isn't true, Chidi finally said, his voice low and dangerous. Tell me Amaka was lying. Tell me you didn't pay people to kill her. Ezine raised her tear-streaked face, her lips trembling. Chidi, I don't know what to say. Say the truth, Chidi shouted, his voice echoing through the house. Did you do it, Ezine? Did you try to kill her? The dam broke. Ezine fell to her knees, her body shaking with sobs. Yes, she cried, her voice cracking under the weight of her guilt. Yes, I did it. I was jealous. I was angry. I thought she had everything. Your love, her success, the life I wanted. I didn't know what else to do. Chidi stared at her, his face twisting with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. You didn't know what else to do? He spat. So you decided to kill her? To kill the woman who called you her sister? The woman who trusted you with everything? Ezine clutched at his trousers, her tears falling like rain. Chidi, please. I didn't mean for things to go so far. I thought it would make things better. I thought we could be happy. Happy? Chidi's laugh was bitter, hollow. Happy? Do you know what you've done to me, to us, to her? Ezine turned her gaze to the floor, unable to meet his fiery eyes. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me, Chidi. I didn't think it would end like this. I didn't think... You didn't think, Chidi roared, pulling away from her grasp. You destroyed everything. You took her away from me. And then you came into my life, pretending to love me, building this sham of a family on lies. His words struck Ezine like blows, but she didn't fight back. She had no defense, no excuses left. And you, Chidi continued, his voice quieter, but dripping with venom. You stole years from Amaka, years she can never get back. Do you even understand what you've done? Ezine sobbed harder, but no words came. Chidi stood for a moment, his shoulders heaving as he struggled to contain his fury. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Ezine cried, reaching for him. Anywhere but here, Chidi said, his voice flat. I can't stay in this house. I can't look at you, Ezine. Not after everything you've done. He paused at the door, turning back to look at her one last time. I loved Amaka with all my heart. And you destroyed that. You destroyed me. Without another word, he left, the door slamming shut behind him. Ezine sat on the cold floor, her sobs filling the empty house. The truth had finally come out, unraveling years of lies and deceit. But instead of setting her free, it had chained her to the unbearable weight of her own guilt. Chidi left with nothing but memories of Amaka, the love he had lost, the life he had dreamed of, and the betrayal that had torn it all apart. The years dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Ezine lived alone in the same house she had once shared with Chidi and their children. The walls seemed to echo with memories of the life she had destroyed. She spent her days sitting on the porch, watching people pass by. Neighbors whispered about her, calling her a murderer and a cursed woman. She became a cautionary tale, a warning to young women about the dangers of jealousy and betrayal. One day, a group of young women walked by, laughing and chatting. One of them stopped and pointed at Ezine. "That's the woman who tried to kill her best friend for a man," she said loudly. Ezine closed her eyes, the words cutting deeper than any knife. One night, Ezine had a dream. She was standing in a bright field and Amaka was there, smiling at her. "Ezine," Amaka said softly, "I've forgiven you, but you need to forgive yourself." Ezine fell to her knees. "Amaka, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I destroyed everything. I'm so sorry." Amaka placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let go of the pain, Ezine. It's the only way to find peace." When Ezine woke up, she felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, she prayed, asking God for forgiveness. Though her life remained lonely and filled with regret, she found solace in helping others. She started sharing her story with young women, warning them about the dangers of jealousy and the consequences of their actions. And so, Ezine spent the rest of her days seeking redemption, knowing she could never undo the past, but hoping to prevent others from making the same mistakes. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. Thank you.